Imagine a time more than 280 million years ago, long before the first dinosaurs ever walked the earth. The world was strange and unfamiliar, yet also alive with promise. Towering forests of ancient trees rose high above swampy ground, their shadows falling across landscapes filled with strange plants that no longer exist today. Rivers wound slowly through broad valleys, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The air was warm, sometimes heavy with moisture, sometimes dry as the seasons changed, for the planet itself was shifting into new and uncertain climates. It was in this ancient age that the first true pioneers of plant-eating life began their slow, deliberate steps across the land. These were the caseasaurs, creatures unlike anything we know today. They were not mighty predators, nor sleek hunters, but peaceful herbivores with round, barrel-shaped bodies and small heads that seemed almost too tiny for their massive forms. To look at them, one might think them awkward or ungainly, yet they carried within them a quiet success. They were among the very first animals to master the challenge of feeding on tough, fibrous plants. As we begin this journey into their forgotten world, let us move slowly, gently, like the caseasaurs themselves. Their story is not one of violence or drama, but of persistence, adaptation, and quiet innovation. These creatures were pioneers in a way few animals have ever been, and though they are often overshadowed by more famous prehistoric giants, tonight we will bring their world to life once more. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let the distant echoes of the Permian Age guide you into the calm and mysterious past. The story of the caseasaurs does not begin in the Permian world itself, but in our own time, many millions of years later. Their bones lay hidden in layers of stone for eons, untouched and unseen, until chance and curiosity brought them to light. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, paleontologists searching the rocky outcrops of North America and Europe stumbled upon fragments of strange fossils. At first glance, these remains did not seem to belong to the mighty reptiles or mammal ancestors already known. The bones were oddly shaped, ribs that flared wide and curved like the frame of a great barrel, and skulls that were small, with delicate jaws. When the first skeletons were carefully studied and reconstructed, scientists realized they had uncovered something new, something that did not fit neatly into the categories they had been using. These animals were not amphibians, though they lived close to watery places. They were not true reptiles either, though their skeletons showed many reptile-like features. Instead, they belonged to a more ancient lineage, the synapsids, the branch of life that would, in the far future, give rise to mammals. Caseasaurs were among the earliest of this group to step fully into a life built around eating plants. The name, casea, meaning cheese, was given to one of the first described genera, not because the animal resembled cheese, but because its broad, rounded bones reminded the discoverer of a block of it. From such curious beginnings, an entire family of creatures would eventually be recognized, the caseasauria. Though their fossils are rare and sometimes incomplete, each new discovery has added a piece to the puzzle, revealing the quiet history of these pioneers of herbivory. Today, paleontologists continue to piece together their story, carefully brushing away the dust of time to bring their strange, gentle lives back into view. To truly understand the caseasaurs, we must pause and look closely at what kind of creatures they really were. At first glance, their bodies might have seemed almost comical, enormous, rounded torsos supported by short, sturdy legs and tiny, delicate heads perched at the end of thick necks. But every part of their design had a purpose, shaped by millions of years of quiet adaptation. Caseasaurs belonged to the synapsids, an ancient group of land animals distinct from reptiles, and more closely related to the line that would one day lead to mammals. Unlike their carnivorous relatives, such as the sharp-toothed dimetrodon, caseasaurs had taken a very different path. They were among the very first large creatures on land to make plants the center of their diet. Their teeth were small, leaf-shaped, and well-suited for cropping soft vegetation. Their jaws were not powerful enough for tearing flesh, but that was never their purpose. Most striking of all was their vast ribcage, which curved outward and expanded to form a great barrel. Inside, scientists believe, was a digestive system capable of fermenting and breaking down tough plant fibers. Just as today's cows and sloths rely on special stomachs and slow metabolisms to live on a leafy diet, so too did the caseaurs rely on their own internal adaptations. They were not built for speed or aggression, but for patience, for surviving on the abundant greenery of the early Permian world. In their quiet way, they were pioneers. At a time when most land animals still hunted insects, fish, or one another, the caseaurs stepped into a new role, that of peaceful grazers, reshaping the balance of ecosystems simply by choosing to eat what others could not. To imagine the world of the caseaurs, we must set foot in the landscapes of the early Permian period, nearly 280 million years ago. The Earth then was both familiar and utterly alien. The great supercontinent of Pangaea was slowly coming together, binding the world's lands into one vast mass. This created extremes of climate, humid lowlands filled with rivers and swamps, and drier uplands where the air grew hotter and the seasons harsher. In the wetter regions, forests thrived. Towering seed ferns and primitive conifers cast long shadows, while horsetails and club mosses crowded the ground. The air smelled of damp leaves and resin, rich with the scent of a world still young. Dragonfly-like insects, some as wide as a human hand, buzzed lazily through the humid air. Amphibians with broad, flat heads lurked in the shallows of ponds and streams, waiting for small prey to pass too close. Out in the drier regions, the forests gave way to stretches of open ground, dotted with hardy plants that could withstand the shifting climates. Here the caseaurs found their place. With their large bodies and slow, deliberate steps, they moved among the vegetation, browsing quietly. They did not need to chase or fight. Their lives were tied instead to the rhythm of the land, feeding when plants were lush, conserving energy when times grew lean. This was not yet the age of dinosaurs, nor of great flowering plants. It was a more primitive world, quieter, raw, and full of experiments in life's design. The landscapes of the early Permian were the canvas upon which the caseaurs painted their story, peaceful figures among forests and open plains, living steadily in a world still shaping itself. The story of the caseaurs is not only about who they were, but also about where they came from. Their roots reach back into the Carboniferous period, a time just before the Permian, when dense swamp forests covered much of the earth and strange amphibians dominated the land. From among these creatures emerged the first synapsids, the lineage that would one day lead to mammals. The earliest synapsids were small, sharp-toothed insect eaters and opportunistic hunters. They fed on insects, fish, and anything they could catch, moving with agility through the shadows of forests. But within this group, some began to experiment with a different way of life. Plants were everywhere, more abundant than any animal prey, but few creatures could make use of them. Slowly, across countless generations, some synapsids began to adapt. Their teeth became better at shredding leaves, their bodies larger to hold more food, and their digestion more complex. It was a bold evolutionary gamble. Eating plants required far more effort than eating flesh. Leaves were tough, fibrous, and low in energy compared to meat. Yet the reward was endless availability. Forests and plains provided a constant supply of food for those able to use it. The caseaurs were among the first to fully embrace this path. They exchanged speed for endurance, aggression for patience, and sharp teeth for leaf-shaped ones. In doing so, they became pioneers, the first great herbivores of the land, setting a pattern that many animals would follow in the millions of years to come. Their story reminds us that survival is not always about strength or ferocity. Sometimes it is about being willing to change, to try something new, and to persist quietly where others cannot. To appreciate the caseaurs fully, we must look closely at their bodies, for their anatomy tells the story of their lives. At first sight, the most striking feature was their enormous ribcage, broad and rounded like the hull of a ship. These wide ribs created space for a vast digestive system, an organ network capable of slowly fermenting and breaking down the fibrous plants of the Permian world. Every curve of bone hinted at the quiet work happening inside, the patient extraction of energy from greenery. Their heads, in contrast, were astonishingly small. The jaws were slender, fitted with rows of leaf-shaped teeth designed not for tearing flesh, but for clipping and shredding leaves. With such delicate jaws, they could not deliver a powerful bite, but they didn't need to. Instead, they cropped vegetation steadily, swallowing mouthful after mouthful to be processed deep within their massive bodies. The limbs of caseaurs were short and sturdy, angled outward in a sprawling gait. They moved slowly, their weight carried carefully with each step. These were not animals built for speed or agility. Rather, they were built for stability, for conserving energy as they roamed steadily in search of plants. Their tails stretched behind them, balancing their round torsos, though not used as weapons. Taken together, their form may seem unusual, even ungainly, but in its own way it was a masterpiece of adaptation. Every part of the caseaur body, tiny head, vast chest, solid limbs, spoke of a creature designed for a calm, deliberate life. They were not hunters, not sprinters, but pioneers of a new way of being, the peaceful herbivores of an ancient age. Though all caseaurs shared the same basic body plan, a small head, wide chest, and sturdy limbs, they were not a single kind of animal. Within their group existed a variety of forms, each adapted to slightly different ways of living. Paleontologists, working carefully with the limited fossils we have identified several genera that together reveal the range of these early plant eaters. One of the earliest known was Casea, a medium-sized creature that gave the family its name. Its skeleton shows the classic caseaur features: leaf-shaped teeth, a broad torso, and slow-moving limbs. From this humble beginning, the lineage expanded. In Russia, fossils of Enidosaurus suggest slightly different adaptations, with hints that it may have lived in more northern climates. In Europe, another form called Ankylosaurus appeared, its bones showing subtle differences in rib shape and limb strength. But perhaps the most famous of all was Caesasaurus, one of the largest caseaurs ever discovered. Growing as long as a bus, with a body so round it seemed almost inflated, Caesasaurus embodied the extreme of what this group could become. Where smaller caseaurs were modest in size, Caesasaurus showed how far herbivorous adaptation could be pushed in the early Permian world. Together, these animals reveal that the caseaurs were not a single oddity, but a whole branch of life, experimenting with plant eating in different ways across different landscapes. Though their fossils are scattered and incomplete, they remind us that even in these early times, diversity was already at work, shaping the story of life on land. Among the caseaurs, one creature stands out as a true giant of its age, Caesasaurus. This animal was immense, stretching up to 6 meters in length, its body round and barrel-shaped, its head tiny by comparison. To see such a being in life would have been remarkable. Imagine a vast, slow-moving presence, its sides swelling with each patient breath, its footsteps pressing deep into the soft Permian soil. Caesasaurus was among the largest land animals of its time, rivaling the predators that shared its world. Yet unlike the shark-toothed hunters, it lived a quiet existence, feeding only on plants. Its enormous body was both a challenge and a shield. Moving such weight required little bursts of steady energy rather than speed, and predators likely found little advantage in attacking such a massive, rotund creature. Sheer size alone may have kept many threats at bay. Scientists believe that the giant caseaur survived through a lifestyle of extreme efficiency. With a slow metabolism, it could extract as much energy as possible from the plants it consumed, relying on its great digestive system to sustain its bulk. In this way, Caesasaurus became a peaceful giant, a symbol of what was possible for herbivores in a world still learning to balance predators and prey. Its presence reminds us that the Permian Age was not only about sharp teeth and hunters in pursuit. It was also a time of quiet giants, moving deliberately through forests and plains, their great bodies shaping the landscape simply by grazing upon it. Caesasaurus was proof that in the deep past, size could serve not only the predator, but also the gentle plant eater. To imagine a day in the life of a caseaur is to slow down time itself. These creatures did not rush or chase. Their lives were measured, deliberate, and attuned to the rhythm of the ancient world. As dawn light spilled over the Permian forests, a caseaur might awaken quietly among the ferns and horsetails, stretching its stout limbs and sniffing the air for the scent of fresh plants. Its morning would be spent moving through the undergrowth in search of food. The small head and delicate jaws cropped leaves steadily, swallowing each bite to be slowly processed within its vast belly. It fed not for excitement, but necessity, taking its time, digesting patiently, and conserving energy for the long hours ahead. Unlike predators, it did not need to hunt or flee. Its slow gait and massive size were sufficient protection, and its energy could be devoted entirely to feeding and surviving. As the day progressed, the casesaur might pause in the shade of a seed fern or beneath the canopy of a conifer, resting its great body while the wind rustled gently through the branches above. Perhaps it moved in loose groups, though some likely wandered alone, content to browse without competition. Predators lurked in the distance, but a casesaur's quiet strength, size, and calm vigilance kept most dangers at bay. Evening would find it settling among the trees, its bulk pressing softly into the warm soil, ready to repeat the same gentle routine the next day. Through this slow, measured existence, the caseasaurs thrived. They were pioneers of a peaceful lifestyle, living entirely on plants in a world dominated by hunters. Their daily lives, though simple, were a testament to endurance, patience, and quiet adaptation, qualities that allowed them to survive and shape the landscapes of the Permian. The caseaurs did not live in isolation. Around them, the Permian world teemed with life, both gentle and dangerous. Their forests and floodplains were shared with amphibians like Diplocalus, whose boomerang-shaped heads glided through shallow waters, and small insectivores that scuttled beneath the undergrowth. Birds had yet to appear, and the skies were patrolled by primitive flying insects, some enormous, some tiny. In this quiet world, the caseaurs moved among other creatures, largely undisturbed, grazing peacefully while smaller animals skirted around them. Yet the world was not entirely safe. Predators lurked in these ancient landscapes. The carnivorous Dimetrodon, with its distinctive sail, prowled the forests in search of meat, while amphibious hunters like Ariops could ambush creatures near water. The caseaurs, slow and ungainly, could not outrun these threats, but they did not need to. Their immense size, particularly in species like Cotyloryncus, made them formidable to attack. Their bodies, combined with patience and awareness, were their defense, a quiet shield against a world of predators. Interestingly, some caseaurs may have lived in loose associations, offering additional safety in numbers. By moving through the forests and plains together, they could detect danger early and protect one another. Their lives were intertwined with the rhythms of other Permian creatures, the hunters, the small insectivores, and the plant life that sustained them all. In this balance of friends and foes, the caseaurs carved out their niche, a slow, deliberate, and enduring presence in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. The caseaurs were more than just gentle giants. They were pioneers of a remarkable evolutionary experiment. In a time when most land animals were still hunters or insect eaters, these creatures embraced a new way of life, herbivory on a large scale. Their bodies were perfectly adapted to this purpose, from the small, delicate jaws to the enormous barrel-shaped torsos that housed complex digestive systems. One of their most important innovations was the ability to process tough plant material efficiently. Unlike smaller animals that could only eat soft leaves or fruits, caseaurs could consume large quantities of fibrous plants, extracting energy slowly over hours or even days. This adaptation allowed them to exploit resources that other creatures could not, giving them a quiet advantage in the forests and floodplains of the Permian. By stepping into this role, caseaurs set a pattern for the future. Their slow, deliberate feeding, vast digestive tracts, and massive bodies became a blueprint that later herbivores would follow: the dicynodonts, early dinosaurs, and eventually mammals. They were not just surviving, they were reshaping ecosystems simply by eating. In this way, the caseaurs were evolutionary innovators, quietly transforming the balance of life in a world still young and unfolding. The world of the caseaurs was not static. Across the Permian period, the Earth's climate shifted gradually but dramatically, shaping the landscapes these gentle giants called home. Forests and wetlands, once lush and abundant, began to recede in some regions, replaced by drier plains and seasonal deserts. Rainfall patterns grew more unpredictable, and the plants that caseaurs relied upon sometimes became scarce or harder to digest. These environmental changes presented challenges for all life, especially for large herbivores like the caseaurs. Survival required careful adaptation, moving to areas where food was still plentiful, conserving energy when resources were low, and relying on their massive digestive systems to extract the maximum nutrition from each mouthful. The slow, steady lifestyle of the caseasaurs made them well-suited for these conditions, but it also meant they could not respond quickly to sudden changes or new predators. The shifting climate also opened the door for other herbivores, more specialized or faster adapting, to begin competing for the same resources. While the caseasaurs had pioneered herbivory on land, the world was moving toward new ecological balances. Their story is a reminder that life is never fixed. Even the most successful adaptations are part of an ongoing dialogue with the environment, and those who cannot adapt fast enough may eventually fade into history. Despite their remarkable adaptations, the caseasaurs did not endure forever. By the late Permian period, around 260 million years ago, their numbers had begun to decline. The changing climate, with drier conditions and shrinking forests, made survival more difficult. Food sources became less reliable, and the landscapes that had once supported them no longer offered the abundance they needed. Competition also increased. Other herbivores, including more advanced synapsids and early dicynodonts, began to occupy the same ecological niches. These new rivals were often faster, more adaptable, or able to exploit different plants, slowly edging the caseasaurs out of their ancestral habitats. Predators continued to loom in the shadows, a constant reminder that survival was never guaranteed. Eventually, the caseasaurs disappeared from the fossil record. Their extinction was not sudden or catastrophic. It was a gradual fading, a quiet retreat from the stage of life on Earth. Yet their legacy lived on. They had been among the first large land herbivores, shaping ecosystems simply by existing and eating. Though their bodies vanished, the evolutionary path they pioneered, the patient, energy-efficient exploitation of plant resources, would be followed by countless creatures in the millions of years to come. Even today, the story of the caseasaurs is only partially known. Their fossils are rare and often incomplete, scattered across distant continents, hidden in layers of rock that took millions of years to form. Each discovery is a careful puzzle piece, giving paleontologists a glimpse into the lives of these gentle giants, but leaving many questions unanswered. Scientists still debate aspects of their biology. Were they fully terrestrial, or did some species spend part of their lives near water? How exactly did their massive digestive systems process such tough plant material? Did they live alone or in small groups, moving together through forests and floodplains? Fossils can hint at answers, but much is left to imagination and careful scientific inference. These mysteries make the caseasaurs all the more fascinating. They remind us that the past is never entirely known, and that life on Earth has always been full of surprises. Every new fossil, no matter how fragmentary, opens a window into a world long vanished. A world where peaceful herbivores walked slowly among towering trees, quietly shaping their environment in ways both subtle and profound. Though the caseasaurs vanished from the Earth millions of years ago, their influence endured. As some of the first large plant-eating vertebrates, they established a pattern that would echo through the ages. Later herbivores, from dicynodonts to dinosaurs and eventually mammals, followed the same path: slow, deliberate grazing, massive digestive systems, and a lifestyle built around patience rather than aggression. Their story reminds us that success in nature is not always about speed, strength, or ferocity. Sometimes it is about quiet adaptation, finding a niche that others cannot exploit, shaping the ecosystem in subtle, enduring ways. In the vast tapestry of life, the caseasaurs were pioneers, proving that herbivores could thrive, grow large, and change the world simply by eating plants. Even today, scientists continue to uncover new fossils and insights, piecing together the story of these gentle giants. They serve as a reminder of the richness of life in Earth's distant past, and the many forgotten creatures whose lives quietly paved the way for the diversity we see today. In studying them, we learn not just about the past, but about the enduring power of adaptation, patience, and perseverance. As we leave the world of the caseasaurs, let us pause and imagine walking among these ancient landscapes. Picture the sun filtering through towering seed ferns, the gentle rustle of leaves in a warm breeze, and the slow, deliberate steps of a massive Cotylodontus moving peacefully through the undergrowth. Around it, smaller caseasaurs nibble quietly on ferns, while distant rivers glint in the fading light, home to amphibians and other forgotten creatures of the Permian. This world is calm, timeless, and yet full of life. The caseasaurs, though long vanished, remind us that history is not only about the fierce and dramatic. It is also about patience, quiet adaptation, and the gentle persistence of life over millions of years. Their story is one of subtle triumph, a reminder that even in a world full of challenges, peace and endurance have their own power. As night falls across this ancient earth, let the image of these peaceful giants linger. Imagine the soft sounds of leaves brushing against broad backs, the slow rhythm of breathing in their great barrels, and the enduring calm of a world shaped by herbivores, not hunters. With this thought, we close the chapter on the caseasaurs, carrying their quiet legacy into our dreams and into the wonder of the worlds that came long after them.